Hey everyone, how are you? Thank you for coming out tonight on this holiday weekend. Really appreciate everyone's presence here. I'll sit on the side. You guys sit there. Ah, so the filmmakers are not here with us. So we're going to do something a little bit unusual tonight, and have a conversation with two people who are experts in their own fields that are relevant to this film. So I'm just going to introduce them briefly. We have Brian Karlsson here, who's a street photographer, and fine artist who's been exhibited nationally and internationally and was nominated for a Grammy for his photographic contributions in Book, which was the 23rd studio album from They Might Be Giants. And his work has regularly appeared in a lot of publications like the New York Times. We have Mila London, who's the longtime editor of Jim Jarmusch, including some of his greatest works, and as well as documentaries like Laurie Anderson's Heart of a Dog and Laura Poitras's Risk. And I am one of the executive producers of the film, which means I did not produce it, but I helped to get it financed and up and out into the world. So thank you all for coming, and we thought we would just talk a little bit about the film and then open it to any questions, but knowing that we are not the filmmakers, if that makes sense to you. So I think I just want to maybe start with, Brian, maybe just opening up with you. We spoke with the filmmakers Jakob and Manon before all getting together this evening. Do you want to start us off with sharing your response to how they described how this film came about?
Sure. So it's kind of an interesting situation because how Jacob and Manon met Joel is sort of similar how Joel met Maggie in the sense that they just met on the street. Jacob and Manon were walking around and saw Joel and started talking, and then the details after that, they became friends and hung out, and the documentary evolved from there. But it was just interesting that how they met was on the street in the same kind of fashion. So
Yeah, and they're separated by, they're two couples basically separated by 45 years in age.
yeah.
And the filmmakers went and lived with Maggie and Joel for an entire year in Tuscany. During the pandemic, yeah.
And also stayed with them when they were in New York too at that ending piece. Kind of traveled around with them a bunch. Jacob and Joel, maybe two or 3 years ago, perhaps.
Yeah, they lived together mid-pandemic, so I think it took a little time before they agreed to do this.
Yeah.
But they literally moved in with them, and then they set up a really interesting approach to making the film. We talked about the actual photographs in the film, but on how street photographers also sort of intuit the semiotics of the frame. But, what's the photographic process of making a film like this, do you think? And do you want to speak a little bit to some of the way that they actually filmed it?
Sure. One of the things I really like about the documentary is that it's kind of has a unique approach in the sense that almost the entirety of the film is shot on a tripod, with a couple exceptions being when they're either Maggie or Joel is their own camera footage, and then I guess there's the one shot of when Maggie's underwater, but pretty much every other shot in the entire film is all on a tripod, which has an interesting effect on sort of democratizing the entire film into having the same tone, where any sort of scene where they could anticipate what was going to happen and set up the camera and figure it out, or things where they set it up about 2 seconds before the action began, all becomes leveled on the same playing field in the actual movie, which makes it have a super cohesive feeling, and makes it feel almost as if it could be a scripted narrative. And Jacob and Manon actually said that that was some feedback they received a couple times, was that some of the things that happen in the movie seem too perfect, that they were scripted beforehand. Like when they're in the gallery, the two back-to-back conversations in the beginning of the movie, because Jacob and Manon did pretty much everything in the documentary, just the two of them. they were jostling between setting up the camera and dealing with the mics, and they didn't listen to the two audio or know the two audio and how they were kind of sort of in parallel until afterwards, which makes that scene really potent and sets up the rest of the film perfectly, and it's just like a testament to kind of like the how things are happenstance and happen quickly, and then it just ended up working out and being unified in a fun way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and people just kind of moving in and out of frame
Yeah.
organically. And I guess the
Yeah.
way they did it was like they would sort of guess what the focus should be set at, and there's no really the way
Yeah.
that it's filmed has a certain kind of
Yeah.
depth to it.
Yeah,
And,
they did like zone focusing for most of it, and that is also a technique that's very commonly used in street photography as well, where you're just like kind of planning for a spot where something will happen so that you can get it when it happens in that spot in frame.
Yeah, so there's like no shallow shots. And then the other thing that would happen is if something happened dramatic, like Maggie's injury, for example, they would have to, be spontaneous and actually run and, in the last second get something set up. And they talked about some of those scenes that were so different for them where they had to go and
Yeah, especially in the hospital,
yeah.
because they weren't really allowed to be there. They were sneaking in.
Right, and they had to run to get them to get the focus and set the aperture and do that all on the fly. But I love that they were trying to sort of find a form that would match and be so attentive to framing. Actually, ultimately, it's kind of amazing how it worked out, given all of that. So I just one of the in speaking, I guess we talked about some of the spontaneous ones that they had to dash for, like when Maggie came home in the ambulance, and they were running between two cameras, 10 minutes. They get to sort of, they had no idea that the scene was unfolding as they were far away, and then I think the hospital, as you said, Mila, and Mila, you've undertaken so many challenging films as an editor, and you have a deep understanding of the commitment that this kind of collaboration, these kind of collaborations take over a long period of time. Can you share your response to the way the filmmakers established a kind of emotional through line and coherence in the film, and how that
Yeah.
kind of thing is assembled?
I think that they really did it thematically, it seemed to me. I mean, from the very first shot, which is Joel in the foreground and Maggie in the background playing the piano, you have this sense of their inequality in a way. And then the next sequence is those scenes on the rug where they really recount their story. There are certain themes, them in the bed, that recur. I think there are like 10 scenes in the bed in different locations. There are about 4 scenes with the ping pong table.
Yeah, I love the ping pong table
Yeah.
competition.
There are various scenes on the couch that, things are repeated. The idea of them dancing comes in at the beginning, and then it happens, it's mentioned when she has the accident, and then you see them dancing at the end, which I think is quite cathartic. So there's a kind of weaving of your interest from the very beginning throughout, and there's an interesting interplay between a lot of conversation and then silence, and they play a lot with the editing, with light cutting hard to dark, or Tuscany going strong to New York City with him flagging the taxi. So there are kind of somewhat jarring shots that I think help wake you up. So and it's really an overriding rhythmic experience, which I think is handled really, really well in this film. When we talked to them on a Zoom recently, the 3 of us, they mentioned that they were very unhappy with the film for quite a while, that it felt like just an assembly for a long time. And then they had a supervising editor come in who had very fresh eyes. That's really the trick with editing, maintaining fresh eyes, just not getting bored with the material that you watch thousands of times. You watch it so many times, and it you know, you can get locked into a certain rhythm. You have to be able to see it in a fresh way, and that to some degree it's a training. But anyway, this supervising editor came in and really kind of was able to help them, you know, detach somewhat from the material and put cards up on the wall and find a better structure, really, because structure is everything with editing.
Wasn't there also a detail about how, I believe it was that supervising editor you mentioned, wouldn't allow them to review the kind of quintessential moment towards the end?
Oh,
And like until kind of the last
Yeah.
moment, and it, like the Maggie opening up to Joel.
yeah. And actually, do you say Jakob or Jacob?
I say Jakob, yeah,
Okay.
but it
Well,
can
'cause
be either, yeah.
he mentioned that there was a scene that they were fighting for, and the supervising editor was like, "No, you cannot keep that scene in the film." So I'm not sure what that scene was because we didn't
Secret.
see it. But yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, are they first time filmmakers? I think.
They are,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's amazing that they did this as a first feature film. It's really an incredible
Yeah.
testament to their relationship and also the time that they spent. I mean, the openness of Joel and Maggie at this age to make themselves so vulnerable and to really. We were talking earlier about, you know, because we were present when they first showed the film, and the four of them came to speak in the Q&A, and how ecstatic Maggie was at the first showing of the film. We felt like she had finally been seen. You
Yeah.
know? And there was always that sort of balance, I think, conversation in the editing process of whether it was cathartic or whether it was annoying to have so much stuff excavated inside a relationship. It was really interesting. Some of the editors, it's the edit feedback team. The editors were 30, 40, and then the supervising editor, Janos Biliskov Jensen, who's someone that I actually had the privilege to work with, is older. He's in his 70s, and he was also experiencing at the time a fresh love, and so it's kind of beautiful the way that he brought those fresh eyes to the edit. I felt like you could see the joy inside of the film, because he was able to help them sculpt it in that way so that it came through. Because I think that was their experience of filming with Joel and Maggie. The four of them are so deeply connected now forever. And yeah, and there's something also about Joel just being a street photographer too, in the way that he notices things too. Right?
Well, I also think it to the point of it being their first film, I also think it's quite also an excellent film because it really accurately portrays who Joel and Maggie are as people. I've worked with Joel for almost, I guess, 5 years now, and it you know, it does a good job of showing exactly who they are, which is, I mean, granted, you would hope that it would feel that way
Right.
after they live with them for so long, but
Yeah.
but you know, in any kind of, whenever you're making work about someone else, it's obviously gets transmuted in some
Yeah,
way.
and you also get a sense of his work as a photographer, which is not done in a kind of expository way. It's done in a very integrated way within the scenes, you know, where he's talking about his work and you see the work. Or, you know, when they're recounting their past and you see the photographs of their lives. And I always think of this film as being bathed in gold, like the golden light of Tuscany is
And that
just.
the leaf.
And that
And the leaf.
yeah.
And the leaf, I wonder, is, you know, is that kind of, it's so symbolic of this, I don't know, when he talks about a still life and the audience laughs, I think is so amazing because, I mean, is it
The
some
laughter is kind of a
of-
non sequitur.
Yeah, or is it some
He's like,
sort of
"Thanks for
like
laughing."
imminent, you know, end or something, you know, I don't know, like a faded leaf. But anyway, it's very beautiful. And then it gets put away very carefully. So that's another thematic image that reoccurs.
Right.
So,
Yeah, the echoes throughout the film. I always say, like, memory is when you're calling up a memory, and it's not so much that you're trying to recuperate something that's lost as it is that you're actually in your brain is actually forming new connections. To and it's such a beautiful way to imagine what's happening with these kind of repetitions. It's like knowing something isn't as important as recognizing it or evoking it in the viewer. It's almost like an invitation to the viewer. There were a number of scenes that they considered sacred, and they talked about the resentment scene with Maggie's absolute fury, and the way that they shot that and put her in the center of the frame. Do you want to speak to that at all?
I mean, I think it is so much more powerful to almost have. I love that Joel is only shown in the reflection until he comes to her at the end, because it then shows the context of them having a direct face-to-face conversation without it being shown in that way, because that's would be the maybe simple, most obvious approach. Two people talking, film them talking. So I think it's a brilliant move to elevate the importance of her and what she's saying by having her be pretty much the solitary element in the frame. And then also, again, that's one of the things I think is so powerful about how they were able to manage having these static, still frames, but have there be so much activity and motion in it that would make it feel very dynamic despite being stuck on a tripod. In like that scene specifically, Joel's just reflected on the side, and then it's coming in from the opposite side of the frame when he actually goes to join her, and it's very dynamic.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's almost when I saw it at Doc NYC, I was like, well, where is he?
Yeah.
And it's a little bit distancing, which helps, I think, just listening to it because it's painful.
And it also makes it seem like he's sitting on the floor at her feet too.
Yeah.
Like at first glance, that's kind of what it seems like.
Right, but her eye line is so
Exactly.
obviously
Yeah,
in another
Yeah, yeah.
direction. So,
Yeah. Because also it wouldn't make sense if he was like sitting on the floor.
Right,
So
right.
it does a perfect way of alluding to things that aren't even there, and then breaking that own illusion. So.
There's an interesting scene at one point earlier in the film, which he puts on his earphone, and that he can't hear that well.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's also interesting because maybe it's evident in the film because there's one scene where he's having a phone call and you don't hear what's happening, but his ear assistant thing, when he gets a phone call, it goes directly and plays in his head. So when he's having the phone call with the doctor that that spurs that whole thing, it's basically like he has headphones in. It's not like he was hearing it. It's like the voice is inside of his head. So it adds some extra complications to that. But and also that also just reminds me of there's a bunch of moments in the movie that have a little like drop of humor to kind of break the otherwise tension. And when she first comes back from the hospital and his alien ringtone goes off twice, it's so funny.
And then
and
she
just
gives
breaks
him
the
that
tension
list,
just enough.
that
Yeah.
list
Oh,
of
yeah,
like
great.
the impossible list
Yeah,
of
yeah,
things
yeah.
to do.
Well,
order.
Well,
Here's the order of things.
Yeah, I love his response at the end. He's like, "Which one of these do you want first?"
It's like, I already told you.
It's true. One of the scenes that I think is so amazing is the bathtub scene. I mean, the way that they went about that, the level of intimacy and what Yanis, the editor, called their unfiltered passion, which I thought was so beautifully put. I mean, we never see people who are older in that kind of intimacy, and as our population ages, I mean, it just seems so. To me, it's so beautiful that bodies are recognized in this beautiful way.
Sure.
It's one of the amazing scenes in the film, I think. The scene where they went to the hospital, I gather that they broke into the hospital or something.
They did.
He sneaks
They like sneaked in behind a security guard.
Oh yeah, okay.
But it was just Jacob and Joel.
Just
Madeline
Jacob
wasn't
and
there.
Joel.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah.
But there's somebody else in the room with her, I think.
There
he
was
said.
another patient in the
Yeah,
room who had a
yeah.
bunch of broken ribs or something, and they were trying not to wake her.
Right.
So-
And apparently she kept like moaning in pain, and they tried to film where that wouldn't be. in
That's terrible.
it would break that illusion of privacy.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like they're in their own little nook
Yeah.
Like it feels very private, which I think is important for that
Right.
scene, especially.
Yeah, yeah.
It's funny. I feel like you can tell that Jacob at some point puts his phone flashlight on
Yeah.
for that scene, and it's like I know he was like, I gotta make sure they can see. I can see what's happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I love I mean, there are two scenes that were actually, I won't say staged, but which they decided that they would do. And one was the scene where they're lying on the carpet with the candles at the opening, and the other was the scene of the dance at the end, which they wanted to give as a gift to the audience, actually. And they spoke about that and wanting to have a feeling of openness at the end of the film. I wonder, to you, the viewers, like how you felt about the film, if there's any questions you'd like to ask to our guests, knowing that they didn't make it, but something that you'd like to discuss
We could try to answer.
or raise, yeah, if there's anything you want to offer.
Personal question. I'm a professional saxophone player, so I felt teased by the presence of a saxophone in a bunch of these scenes that was never played. And so I'd like to know the background of that. And also, I found it interesting that Maggie kept being referred to as a writer and a shrink, and yet clearly was a musician and composed some of the pieces, and
Yeah.
that was never touched upon.
A lot of the music is hers that's playing throughout the film, is her piano playing.
So can you tell me more about her background or anything to do with
Yeah.
her relationship to music or the saxophone?
I don't know about the saxophone, but I will say that and I don't know if you do, but
I don't know about the saxophone.
yeah, I don't know
either.
about the saxophone, but I'm going to ask.
I'll ask.
I'm going to ask them about that. I'm assuming that it's either somebody who would come and play with her, or it's something that she could play. But I know she's a pianist. But one of the things about Maggie is like she does so many things. I mean, I feel like part of her being an artist is to be creative every day of her life. There's something about that. And when you finally hear her work or hear her play, and you realize that she does have real actual talent and is genuinely an artist, that it feels so, I don't know, for me that just felt so resonant that she would be so frustrated in even though Joel makes every effort to really listen, but at the same time there's a kind of obliviousness to it. It's like it's so much the predicament of people who have so much to offer and then who are not seen, and that's gendered often, especially at this age, that they've been through decades of this. And yet and I think also just the way that he noticed her, out of the sort of corner of his eye, which is like such a trademark of a great street photographer, that's how he would actually notice her, and she would see him in a different way. And I love when she says he kind of unfurled, when he said his name.
I like her drawings also.
Yeah.
Those drawings that she did after her accident are really great that you get to see them. And then when she's drawing in Cornwall, and
yeah.
he comes over and says, "Oh, that's so beautiful." I mean,
Yeah.
and I mean, he's working all the time also throughout the whole film.
Right.
He's constantly
Taking pictures.
taking
yeah.
pictures or preparing for his show or doing a show. I mean, they're both, artists.
And I don't know if there's any in the film, but she also makes sculptures as well.
Yeah.
So truly across all fields.
Yeah. And such a different way of seeing too. I mean, if you think about, and I guess, I don't know how you feel about this, but there's some filmmakers I've spoken to who film all the time, and like Ross McElwee, for example, or James Longley, and James has spoken a lot about how he's been filming in war situations and how the lens, how his world has been mediated through the lens, and how that's given him a certain kind of freedom, but also a certain kind of protection. And that's really different from Maggie.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, like I've heard often times the phrase that that camera is like a passport in a way, where you can use it to kind of get in and out of situations. Like it's very easy to be trespassing somewhere and someone's like, "What are you doing?" "I'm just taking pictures." Oops. Like, kind of. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry.
I'm going to ask about the saxophone, though.
I have another question.
Okay.
Do you know where the apartment is in Manhattan, and did they finally sell it?
They did sell it, and it was up on the Upper West Side, on like West End,
It
and
looked like an Upper West Side.
Yeah. yeah. Beautiful apartment.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I love the film, and thank you for coming. It adds another dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were you saying the filmmakers moved in with them to make the film, or moved in as friends and then decided?
No, they moved in to make the film. They agreed that they would make a film together. Yeah.
But don't forget, it was COVID,
Yeah.
so you couldn't. I mean, you
couldn't
were
come and
living,
go,
You couldn't have
yeah.
that many people around that you didn't know, and you couldn't come and go.
You couldn't come and go.
Exactly.
You kind of had to be together.
Also, it was Tuscany, so it was a nice place
Yes,
to
super.
be.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's super
They had,
isolated.
they had the
and removed.
room. Yeah. Unlike in New York, they had the room to do it. Yeah. Yeah. So what some people did during COVID.
They spent all of COVID in Tuscany.
I think, yeah.
A lot of it.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But they live with them in the Manhattan apartment as well.
I think it was more or less because in the Manhattan apartment scenes, that was when they were in the process of selling the apartment.
Right.
So they had come and they were just staying there for like a month or so. And Jacob and Manon came for, I don't even think the entirety of that time, but just a few weeks. It may have been the whole month. I'm not sure. But it was there was overlap there. But it wasn't, they weren't like expressly living with them in the Manhattan side. It was just because they were here, we're coming with you because the documentary is still happening.
So all of the Manhattan footage was from one period of time.
It's from one period
Yeah,
of
it's
time.
from
Yeah,
one period
it's
of
from
time.
that month that they were there at the apartment, like packing up and
And
doing all this
archiving his stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Since you know Joel, do you have a sense of his? Does he have an opinion about all the like iPhone culture and everybody's a photographer now and stuff?
I don't think I've heard him specifically talk about that, but knowing Joel, I would say that he would say it's good. I think he is of the mind that the more photographers, the better, and that pictures are great. Why not make them? Which I agree with. I think it's the easiest art form in the sense that you press a button and you have a result. And I think that it's one of the most satisfying things in the world. So why not do it? You can always delete a picture, but you can't take one you didn't take. So.
Good point.
I'm not sure I agree with that, but as a filmmaker who's made like 65 films, I am always questioning whether we need to make more images, actually. I feel a little bit like we live in a tyrannical image environment.
Well, we do now.
But I do really appreciate great photographs. I look
Sure.
at them all the time. So it's this kind of back and forth dynamic. I don't know.
I love a stimuli bath, though.
Yeah.
I like being overwhelmed by imagery because
Yeah.
then it's a lot easier to figure out what you really like. I don't know.
They also had a ton of footage to deal with this. They were just filming a lot.
Yeah.
So what percent do you think of stuff ended up being?
I can't answer that actually.
I don't know, but I if I were to guess, I would say like if there's 10%,
Yeah, that's
I'd
what I
be
would-
surprised. Yeah.
100 to 1.
Yeah. It's, I mean, really this kind of filming. I mean, what I love is the sort of in and out of, like passing in and out of frame. There's some filmmakers that have done that. Like Woody Allen comes to mind. A lot of like, if you remember Annie Hall, for those of you who've seen it, people move in and out of frame in that film all the time. And there's some films that stand out in my mind of where people pass in and out of frame a lot. And I kind of love that because I'm so used to cameras moving around and following people all the time. So there's some kind of relief for me in watching this film that I can just actually watch them at their own pace. And also I really love the attention to it's amazing the attention to the light and how they manage to intuit and anticipate so many things. And I think that came from living together. There's like an emotional sonar going on inside of the film where they were somehow ahead of it at the same time as being very standing back. I mean, sometimes they would just set up the camera and leave, actually go out of the room, give them some privacy. Without observing them, without spying on them, so to speak. So
Yeah, one
Yeah.
shot of the bed I'm obsessed with the beds, I think, because there's so many beds.
So many conversations in the bed,
Yeah,
too. Yeah.
but it was
Or
kind
over
of
the bed.
outside the room and looking into the bedroom, and that was interesting.
Yeah.
The ashes conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that it is, again, a testament to how comfortable they are together, but also to the speed that they could get set up when things were happening and anticipating it, because so many of these incredibly heavy and emotional discussions, I highly doubt, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I highly doubt they weren't like, hey, do you guys want to talk about some really deep shit real quick while we set up the
Yeah,
camera?
no,
Like,
it's
that definitely
not
wasn't how that
happening.
happened. So,
No.
yeah. And I also think, again, with the kind of, to go back to the tripod thing again, and allowing things to kind of move in and out of a frame and let the frame breathe and evolve as what's actually being captured is evolving, also really catered well to the type of people that Maggie and Joel are. They both have such a calm and meditative way of speaking, and they're very articulate and very eloquent with how they speak. And it's kind of, I've like described listening to Joel talk as like a sound bath sometimes. Like if you talk to him on the phone, he always does like FaceTime, and he's always like, hi, and he has like this very like kind of calming
Yeah.
like, you know, timbre in his voice. And Maggie's the same way, and I think that pairs well with how the film is physically constructed. It feels very like, it feels married. It feels
I mean, it feels like a feature film,
yeah.
but it also feels
Yeah.
like a cinema verite film.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it's this interesting kind of cross-section, because it's a documentary, but it feels like a dramatic film. It's so beautiful,
They're natural actors.
Yeah.
and they're natural actors, and I think it seemed like it was pretty easy for Maggie as a therapist to go right into the heart of the conversation, you know, just.
Yeah, so provocative.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
provocative.
very provocative, very deliberately so. Yeah, almost like she needed the witness
Right.
somehow to get to it all. Yeah.
Where are they living now?
London.
So they moved to England,
Yeah.
From Tuscany, yeah.
her place, not in New York.
No. I don't think they were ever going to move back to New York. I think they've come back when the old place, before they sold the old place, they would come back. Really, it was just Joel would come back occasionally for work and stuff like that. But after the big packing endeavor, and we'd now moved all the studio to another studio space, and there's no like apartment component anymore, and they just live in London.
And they have that place in Cornwall, right? Yeah. At the end.
I didn't know if that was theirs or if they just vacationed. I always heard it spoke of as we're going on vacation.
Oh,
So
maybe.
I don't know if
Yeah,
it's
maybe.
theirs or if they
Nice.
just rent it.
Maybe,
But
yeah.
Pretty
That
nice.
place
You'd be
where
surprised.
they're dancing on the cliff is Cornwall in England.
Yeah,
So that's
near
where it
St.
is.
Ives.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place.
But I think that it was painful for Maggie to be in New York. You know, it was too riddled with his past.
Yeah,
And it was painful for Joel to leave New York.
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I mean, that was a studio. The where all that stuff was, the studio apartment was a studio since the '60s. So
Right.
That was a big deal to move out.
And they
Yeah.
lived together in New York, right?
Yeah, I mean, the film begins in New York, and then when they return to New York,
But how long did they live together in New York?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not sure about
I
that
don't
either.
know. I don't
Seemed
know.
like a significant amount of time.
Yeah, I don't actually know the answer to that.
I don't know because whatever Tusk. Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I mean, she said she made it pretty, so they must have spent significant time there.
Yeah. But
I would,
it's true.
I would imagine it would be at least like 5 years. I would say, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, but it's true that it wasn't her place. She didn't
Right.
feel it
Oh,
was
absolutely.
her place. Yeah. 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 Does anyone have any other thoughts they want to share? Or? No? All right. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. We
Yeah,
really
thank you so
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And if you like the film, please tell friends and have people come and see it. We'd like to keep it on the big screen if we can. Yeah. All right. Thanks so much. Good night. Thank you both.